I am making this video because I believe making student loan discharges through bankruptcy much easier will provide much needed relief for those who desperately need it and will go a long way in combating predatory practices that are causing the student loan debt crisis. There are a lot of predatory practices surrounding student loans, and I think a lot of these practices stem from the belief that you should go to college no matter what the cost. So if you go to a college that has an outrageously high amount of tuition and you exhaust all the federal resources and grants and you're still left with some sum of tuition to take, there's always going to be a private company there to offer you the rest of that loan. And these loans from private companies can be especially predatory because they're already on top of all the loans that you took out from the federal government. And these loans often have a lot higher interest rates. And all of the tuition costs summed together in a loan usually is going to be too high for anybody to pay off in a reasonable amount of time. And the reason that this is so stressful is because this tuition stays with the student long after they graduate, and the current system makes it extremely hard to bankrupt these student loans, leaving one predatory decision to affect somebody for the rest of their life. Through allowing easier bankruptcy on these student loans, we provide a recourse to fight back against these predatory practices. This is just an extension of our free market economy. If a business is predatory, they should not be rewarded with profits. So for example of this, if a loan company is giving out student loans at an extremely high interest rate and that they know people won't be able to repay those loans, they shouldn't be rewarded by just having an infinite stream of money coming in from people who are unable to pay these loans, because these loans are inherently predatory. They were designed in a way to make it extremely difficult to repay these loans. An example of this is a small college that has insanely high tuition fees, and most students can't afford to go there. So they say, okay, we'll give you these student loans so you can attend this school. And these interest rates are off the roof, and it's very unlikely that these students are going to be able to repay these loans. And I think that's just a terrible system. We shouldn't be making these students beholden to pay these loans that were inherently predatory. Just as there's no such thing as free money for the people receiving the money, the lendees, because they have to pay interest on it, there shouldn't be any free money for the lender either, where they just have an ironclad guarantee of profits. The fact that people might be declaring bankruptcy on these loans makes it far more likely that these loans are going to be fairer. For example, credit cards are another form of loans that can often be predatory, but they have a big backstop because they can get bankrupted. So if a credit card company is very malicious and offers a credit card with an insanely high interest rate that makes it virtually impossible to pay back, that company is going to get bit in the butt, because all those people they loan to who aren't able to pay off the loans can simply bankrupt the loans and are no longer a victim from that predatory practice. But student loans are different, because if you offer a student loan with an outrageously high amount of interest, making it virtually impossible to pay back that loan, there's very little recourse to get rid of that loan because it's so difficult to bankrupt student loans. Unfortunately, under the current system, it is so much harder to discharge student loans than other forms of investment. Some of these reasons make sense, but others, not so much. The biggest reason for all of the restrictions around discharging student loans through bankruptcy is because it's a form of unsecured loan where there's no collateral, but also these are very long-term investments which you don't want to see high interest rates on. So if there weren't these restrictions in place, many argue student loans would have outrageously high interest rates, making it virtually impossible to take out student loans. Also, lenders would be extremely restrictive on who they give out loans to, only giving out loans to those that they think can pay back the loan. This does not necessarily have to be a bad thing. We don't want a situation where people are continuously getting into debt that they are unlikely to pay off. If a student in the past has struggled academically, or they are choosing to pursue a major that often has low career potential earnings, it makes sense for that student to take out less in loans. At the end of the day, if we're seeing college as an investment, we should be very confident that students taking out loans are going to be able to repay them and see a return on that investment. I'm not sure if that decision should be made for them, but spiraling student loans that's unlikely to get repaid is much worse. I do think that if we started tying the amount of student loans to the career outcomes of each degree or major, we would see a vast decline in the amount of student loan debt, as more students are able to pay off those loans with the earnings that they're getting from their college degree. Those filing for bankruptcy on their student loans likely are not seeing the benefit from a college degree, either because they dropped out before receiving that diploma or because their college degree is not serving them to the extent that they planned. Eliminating or reducing the monthly payments for student loans each month could go a long way in improving their standard of living and support for the next generation. Providing relief so people can continue to forge their future is the entire purpose of bankruptcy and is a net positive for our society. These loans should be seen no differently than any other investment that didn't see a return. But it is not only those that are declaring bankruptcy that are going to be benefited by this. Hopefully, by increasing bankruptcy on student loans, we can take down the total amount of student loans being taken out each year to an extent that decreases tuition costs overall. Currently, colleges have a blank check on how much to charge for tuition, which I think is a big reason of why college costs keep spiraling upward. Reducing the amount of student loans to cover that tuition cost could do a great job in decreasing the amount that colleges charge for their tuition. If the student loans aren't out there for any student to just cover those tuition costs, colleges have no choice but to decrease the amount of tuition that they charge to keep students coming to their institutions. I would also love to see some small predatory colleges go out of business, because as the government and private companies become more cautious about who they give out loans to and their ability to repay these loans, it'll lead to a lot of small colleges that charge outrageous amounts of tuition for very low career costs to go out of business, as these loans will no longer be granted to attend these institutions. And I think by cutting down on all these predatory colleges, we can make it a lot easier for people to make a smart investment to go to college. This way, bankruptcy regarding student loans could really be helping everybody in all parts of the college cost crisis. And this is already happening to some extent. In 2022, the Department of Justice and the Department of Education worked together to make a more streamlined process for discharging student loans through adversarial proceedings, making the guidelines for discharging student loans through bankruptcy much clearer. Currently, when looking to discharge student loans through bankruptcy, you must file an additional adversarial proceeding showing undue hardship from repaying these loans. This is a standard not required for most other forms of unsecured debt. In the past, legal representation was required to file these adversarial proceedings and prove undue hardship, but since this new change, it's become much clearer and simpler to discharge these student loans without legal representation, making the process far more standardized. The Secretary of Education said, "Clear, fair, and practical standards are helping struggling borrowers find relief that was previously out of reach. This data should puncture the myth that struggling borrowers cannot discharge their student loan debt through bankruptcy. We will continue to work with our partners at the Department of Justice to make it a simpler and easier for borrowers to get much needed relief in the way that it was intended." This process seems to be working extremely well, with 98% of the filings filed within the first 6 months of this program, resulting in either full or partial discharges of student loan debt. It is unclear if these updated procedures are going to do enough, but it's great to see that the government is seeing bankruptcy as one of the key ways to eliminate student loan issues in America. However, I would want to push this further and eliminate the need for adversarial proceedings and the additional steps for discharging student loans because most other forms of unsecured debt do not require these extra steps. This system is not supposed to be for everyone. It's supposed to be a lifeline for those who desperately need it. Those who did not graduate college or fell for a predatory system should not be shackled for the rest of their life. There are built-in guidelines for bankruptcy that we as a society have deemed appropriate. Student loan debt is spiraling out of control, and it doesn't make sense to treat this one form of investment so much differently than others. And that is why I think bankruptcy is one of the key solutions to solving the student loan crisis.